Welcome to the Second Life Book Club. My name is Draxtor, and we're starting a little bit different today. These are the first few pages of our guest Indrapramit 2017 novel, The Devourers. My part in this story began the winter before winter started getting warmer, on a full moon night so bright you could see your own shadow on an unlit rooftop. It was under that moon, slightly smudged by December mist clinging to the streets of Calcutta, that I met a man who told me he was half werewolf. He said this to me as if it were no different from being half Bengali, half Punjabi, half Parsi, half werewolf under a full moon. Not the most subtle kind of irony, but a necessary one if I'm to value the veracity of my recollections. To set the stage, I must tell you where I was. Think of a field breathing the cool of nighttime into the soles of your shoes, a large tent in front of you, cloth, canvas, and bamboo, lit from within, electric lamps surrounding a wooden stage that creaks under the bare feet of bright-robed minstrels. This tent is where the rural bards of Bengal, the Bauls, gather every winter to make music for city people. It's raw music at times, both shrill and hoarse, stained with hashish smoke and the self-proclaimed madness of their sect, a celebration of what's been lost under the vigil of orange-eyed streetlights. I'm there that night. Afraid to go inside? The stranger asks. They may be mad, but they won't bite. The music's a little too shrill for my ears. I can appreciate it just fine from here. The stranger takes out his own hash joint. I glance sideways at him as he lights up. The flame illuminates a slender face, its glow running along hairless skin and brushing against the lines of shadow that hug his high cheekbones. I'm a werewolf, he says. Smoke flares out of his mouth in curls that wreathe his long black hair, giving him silver blue locks for a passing second. I don't see him throw away the match, but his foot moves to rub it into the soil. He's wearing wicker sandals. Dark flecks of dirt hide under unclipped nails on the ends of his long toes. Apparently the cold doesn't bother him enough for socks or shoes. And that's the first few pages of Indrapramit The Devourers. Today we're going to start things differently to get a little taste before we introduce our guests. Now I would like the camera to go to our drone friend, because we have a drone friend who will speak with the voice of Nathan Fillion from Firefly, and he will read the first chapter from our other guest today, Yudhanjaya Wijeratne's The Salvage Crew.
I want to make one thing clear. I did not, repeat, not ask for any of this. I did not ask to be promoted. I did not ask to be made overseer. And I certainly did not ask to be strapped down in this tin can body of a drop pod, hurtling down with 3 idiots screaming their lungs out inside me. The company promised me an A-team, the kind of people Joe Haldeman wrote about in the Forever War, astrophysicists who could blow a man's head off at 500 meters. The best of the best. You know, the master chiefs and all that. The kind of people who go in, get shit done, leave a nice calling card, and live to strike a heroic pose. Did we get what it said on the label? Well, let's look around. Exhibit A, Simon Justin. Simon is my geologist. He's 35-ish, biological time, and looks like someone stuck eyeballs on a mop. They told me Simon would be reliable. He's good at everything to do with rocks and earthquakes. He's scored well in the shooting sims. He can do CPR and basic medical aid, and looks like your average nerd trying too hard to be cool. He'll make a fine crew member. But here's what they didn't tell me. Simon grew up on the brutal world of old New York. He was sold to a corporation as a child. They stuck a needle into the center of his brainstem and jacked him into a virtual fantasy world so they could broadcast his feed as reality TV. His entire childhood was spent being beaten up by gangs and digging holes in fake ground so nobody could hear him crying in the fake darkness. Except for the audience, of course.
And that was Nathan Fillion as a drone reading from Yudhanjaya Wijeratne's The Salvage Crew. Again, welcome to the Second Life Book Club. It's a full house on a full moon set. This is the Second Life Book Club every Wednesday, 12 o'clock, Second Life time. A quick few housekeeping notes, and then we'll introduce our wonderful guests proper. The show is produced by Strawberry Linden and myself every Wednesday, 12 o'clock. We have several other shows. Check out the calendar. We're booked until the beginning of 2022 now, I think. Big thanks to Marianne McCann, Arden Schwartzman, Silas Merlin, Kralos. They make avatars, they make props, they make environments and stages. Also today, big thanks to Hattie Panacek, who made this amazing space station that we're underneath. Maybe we'll go into the space station later. Big thanks also to all the Lindens and the moles that are helping us putting this together every week. Contact me, SL Book Club at Draxtor.com if you have an author that you want to see on the show, or if you have any other ideas. Now, our guest today, Indrapramit Das, is a dragon. He's coming to us piped in from Calcutta in India. He's the author of short stories, of essays. He studied, as I found out, under, among others, Chuck Palahniuk, and I hope I pronounced his name correctly, Fight Club, a huge fan. Then on the other side, we have Yudhanjaya Wijeratne, also with a little, he's not a dragon, but he has a dragon on his side. He's a big data scientist at Learn Asia, which is a pro-poor, pro-market think tank. We have to talk about this because I'm pro-poor and anti-market. So we'll find, let's see if we find common ground. He's also the co-founder of Team Watchdog, which is a group that is, according to their website, sniffing out fake news. So they do that with humans and with AIs. He wrote a handful of novels, many short stories, and his latest is The Salvage Crew. Thank you both for coming to the book club today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us in this space. This is awesome.
And thank you everyone for coming and watching us.
We have a gigantic space here, and it's completely full. And we talked a little bit about this before we went on air, and I like to open with that question. How is the COVID era, this isolation and uncertainty, affecting your creativity? And maybe Indra, if you would go first.
It's been difficult for sure. I think I'm watching more movies than I used to, which is nice. But writing is always quite challenging, in under any circumstances, and it's been several years of very rough and tumble history. So it's been difficult for a while, and so I can't say that it's affected my creativity in a very drastic way. It's it's always kind of a battle to tune the world out while also filtering it into your work, because
Yeah.
writing reflects the real world, even when you're writing about the future or fantasy. And I often write about the real world adjacent to magic anyway. So yeah, I can't say that it's in terms of output, it's still more or less the same. I go long stretches with kind of just thinking about what to write and then getting into a panic of indecision about all the ideas and which one to try on first. And then, starting is always the most difficult part.
That is the creative this loop when people outside of the creative field often sort of long to be in our line of work, broadly speaking, and sort of romanticize this sort of sitting around and all these ideas are floating around, and you just grab them and then you mold them, and then it's done and you can do whatever you want, and it's such a freedom. Yeah.
Some people can do that easily, I guess. I have met, you mentioned Claire and West. We had one instructor, the amazing Stephen Graham Jones, whose work I recommend very strongly. And, he is incredibly prolific, and he can write literally, he's written novels in weeks, and that is, I'm so envious of him because some people can do that, and I just cannot, at least at this stage. There was I have written short stories in one night, but not for a while. That hasn't come to me.
Well, we're going to
But
talk about the Devourers, and we heard a little bit of your prose. That's why I wanted to start the show this way, because really, I mean, your language and the story is amazing too, but the language is just really good. And I wanted people to
thank
get
you.
a feel for the language. I always say when I started reading as a teenager, I read Conan the Barbarian, and my mother was appalled at that. Not only because of the sort of misogynistic, one-dimensional characters, but also because she thought the language was crap, and she pushed all the German stuff on me. And now I'm kind of in between. But Yudhanjaya, what is your situation in the day-to-day with COVID, with the uncertainty? Do you get stuff done? Do you have any tips of
Well,
maybe time management, or get the creativity flowing despite
well,
all the
I
madness?
I thought this would be beneficial, really. Uh, Sort of like my ideal writer scenario, right? Lock me up with enough food and internet access, and you'll get stuff.
Exactly.
And and like
Forced
I like
solitude. Yeah.
yeah, like and before I got into data science, really, I started out as a journalist, and I ran one of Sri Lanka's like first tech journalism network. So I sort of pride myself on being able to, even on really bad days, being able to sort of have this mental muscle that I can flex, and I can go for 1,000 words or 2,000. And I thought, okay, this is perfect. I'm going to turn into a massive powerhouse of productivity. Um, Now, some of that has worked out. For example, the Salvage Crew, which was like really like an experiment in seeing if I could co-write with a bunch of programs where the world is generated this way and so on and so forth. Some of those experiments have worked.
You're already spoiling it. No,
Oh, really?
please
So,
keep going,
but,
because
but
we're going to
like,
read a little bit later.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
actually,
Sorry,
yeah.
sorry about that.
No.
Some of those
Go ahead.
experiments have worked. However, it's become very staggered. Like I go days without like I don't seem to remember. Time just slips. Time is a face on the water. As I draw closer, it seems to vanish. And on some days like this Sunday, for example, I woke up feeling perfectly refreshed, sat down, wrote 7,300 words, which is an extreme. um, Everything seems to have gone to extremes. Some days I sit down and I can't remember names. I stop. Uh, I forget the names of objects around me unless I have things in sight. I have difficulty recalling their names and functions. How on some days, I'm on a different extreme altogether. It's been a bit of a year of extremes, really. This period.
This is really interesting. I would like to also, people in the chat, Sapphire says, so true. People in the chat, I'm glancing over at the chat, and I'll incorporate it into the discussion if you want to share your stories and comment as we're moving on with the conversation. Please do. I'll make sure that I incorporate this into the talk. Yutanjia, thank you for sharing this. It really is tough. And yeah, I was thinking while you were talking about AI, also the Salvage Crew has an AI in there, and he writes poetry, and you actually generated the poetry with an engine. Which is amazing. We'll talk about this later. I was just thinking as you were talking, Time Keeps on Slipping into the Future, which was written by an AI by the name of Steve Miller in the 70s. Now, that's a joke for older people. Look it up. With two guests, it's always a little challenging. I want to go to Indra and introduce his work, and then and try to go back and forth a little bit. Indra's book, The Devourers, I just finished it this morning, and it's deeply affecting. If I don't know how to describe it, it's maybe a tragic love story. Tongue in cheek would be werewolves in love. Um, you write a lot about their second selves. Of course, me as a second lifer, I found that very interesting. The term that you use when they
Mhm.
morph
But
from
it's
their
also
human
so
form.
many other. Just to jump in, it's also
Go
so
ahead.
many other things, right? Because when I read the Devourers, I read it as an interrogation of identity and what
Yes,
different identities and the masks we wear in different scenarios and settings, what that means to us, and how the performance becomes the performer in a sense. But carry on.
absolutely. No,
That's one of those
absolutely.
novels that you can read in so many different ways, and they're all rich and beautiful and so well written.
Absolutely. This is all parallel. Destruction versus creativity, do we define ourselves through destroying things? Do we define ourselves through our creative deeds? And Jutta, actually, one of the things that I'm going to ask you, after Indra, maybe you give us a quick premise of the book, and then Jutta can ask the one question. If you were sort of in a book presentation of Indra, let's do a little role play. Imagine you're going to a book presentation by Indra, and you're sitting there in the audience, and you're his number one fan, and you only have one question to ask him. So, but first, Indra, how would you describe your book very briefly? In Silicon Valley, they have the elevator pitch. I'm not going to say do
Oh
it in
God,
12
the
seconds.
dreaded, the dreaded elevator pitch. No, whenever someone asks
No.
me that, I actually do have that somewhere, but whenever someone actually asks me to do an elevator pitch of it, it just vanishes from my head, like immediately, instantly. Absolutely. But, I would describe it as um, a cross-genre dark fantasy if you're getting down to marketing terms. But, I think both you and Yuda have described it very kindly. I think I was aiming to write a novel that isn't easily put into boxes, that isn't uh, doesn't hew to categories very easily. And when I always try and do that, I love mixing up genres. So yeah, it's a werewolf book, it's a shapeshifter book, it's a romance. But I say romance with reservations because it is uh, the the relationships in this book are extremely toxic, and they
Yeah.
should not be aspirational in any way because it's
The
very much
father is a rapist, and let's just say how it is. The father
exactly
of
one
one
of
of the
one
main
of the
protagonists is
characters, yeah,
yeah.
is a literal monster and a rapist, and a significant part of the book is from his viewpoint. So and even the relationships that don't involve him are essentially predatory prey modeled in a way, because these shapeshifters, they don't know how to interact with humanity, and the characters in the novel that are shapeshifters, they're trying to figure out how to approach this prey species in a way that makes sense. And it's about how destructive we are in the end, of course, and how creative we are as well.
That's right, and maybe also about the when we love people, maybe we do need to destroy them. I mean, that's what the shapeshifters charge the humans with. They say, you think that we're violent, but look at you guys. Um,
uh,
is it a
yes.
Did you set this out as a fairy tale instruction? Because one of the things that is so cool about this book is also how it creeps up on you. In the beginning, you go like, okay, there's this dude, he's meeting the other dude who is saying like, yeah, I'm a werewolf, and he goes, what? And then I was intrigued from the beginning, but then it just goes places that I just totally did not expect, and it's one of those things every week. It's my challenge not to spoil, yet create interest in this work. So I don't want to reveal any plot points, but you're weaving in so much mythology, also in Indian
Mhm.
mythology, and even suggest that these characters are, I mean, they well, not only Indian mythology, also Norse mythology, because some of the shapeshifters, they come from Europe originally, and then they come over to the Indian continent.
Mhm. So
It's good. That's all I have to say.
thank
Actually,
you very much.
my blurb would be deeply affecting if this was a movie. Did I already say that? Yeah.
it is very unlikely to become a movie.
Why? This is a perfect movie. This is a perfect movie. And I don't watch a lot of movies, but
You
this
know,
is it has so much action.
just to sort
It
of
has
stick it.
violence. Sorry, this is my 12-second elevator pitch. Give me 12 seconds, Jetta. So here's why you need to make this a movie, okay? There is romance, okay? And there is violence. It is incredibly violent. You can do incredible CGI stuff
But
with, yes, yes.
Drax, I'm not the one who makes that decision. Of course,
I
I would make it
know.
into a movie.
I mean, I'm just gonna say that, you know, I'm
You're
just gonna
not
say that
Hollywood? What?
I hope it gets turned into a movie. I agree with Drax. However, if
Thank
it
you.
does, it'll
You
be
know,
one of those things where I look at the movie and I look at the book and go, dude, read the book. It's so much better because
but
for me,
you know,
like the interiority, the prose, I mean, that marvelous capture of what people actually go through.
thank
It's
you.
gonna
But
be
on
really
this note, I have to add though that the Salvage Crew would also make an amazing movie. I mean, it's absolutely
Yes.
again perfect for filming, and you even got Nathan Fillion in there already.
Well,
yeah.
if you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Second Life Book Club, which I created to celebrate the written word. But of course, my guests today want to make movies. At the same time, they don't have any Hollywood power, and neither have I. So, Yuta, if you were in a presentation, you just read The Devourers, and Indra is on stage presenting the book. What's the one question that you would want to ask him
The
about the
one
book?
question I'd
Or
ask
about
though
his
as a
work.
writer, how is your prose that good? Teach me your secrets.
Well, that is very flattering. Your prose is also very good, Yuda. I don't think you need to be
Well,
taught
you've learned to
anything.
salvage crew.
Yes, I don't think you need to be taught anything. And anyway, you know, it's as you well know, it's not something that can be taught. It's something you discover
Of
on your
course. But
own. You know,
No, but
like
that is a good question. But maybe you could get us a sense of how much you labor over the work, because we live, and I'm not, I write all the time, but I write different things. I write storyboards, I write shot lists, I write transcribed documentary interviews, and those kind of things. But when I sometimes look at book Twitter, uh, people go like, "Oh yeah, today I wrote 20,000 words." So what does that mean? Is that the first draft, or is that the refining? So because I was wondering, your prose really is beautiful. Um, how many revisions do you go over a page, or how do you just throw it out on the page, like 50 pages, whatever, and then you go over it 3-4 times to refine it?
it depends. It depends on the work. You know, short stories are what I write most often, obviously. And I wrote this novel a long time ago in 2000. Well, it was several years, but the first draft was written in one kind of burst over the last semester of my university because it was my MFA thesis, the first draft. And but even that, it was see, this is it can be such an organic and haphazard process. I mean, the first draft of the novel was I used a short story and a novelette that I wrote in college in undergrad as the seeds of the novel. So the first chapter of the novel is was a short story I wrote in college as an undergraduate, and
Hmm.
it almost hasn't changed. I mean, of course, the ending has changed to make it transition into a novel. No, when I first wrote the first chapter as a short story, it ended with the stranger just kind of disappearing and walking into the night, and and the narrator just kind of reflects on things. Um, yeah, that piece of writing hasn't really changed at all. I mean, over the years. But the novel, I wrote it very quick, and it all just came out in this rush, this euphoric rush, and that's often how I write. It just kind of uh, bursts out of me after long stretches of suffering and trying to start, and then once I actually begin to understand what's begin to grasp the world and the characters, then it just kind of pours out, and it's almost like being on drugs. I mean, it's that ecstatic
Yeah.
for me. But
Agree.
before that, when I'm trying to get to that point, it's just it can be extremely slow where you just keep starting and keep deleting and keep starting. But yeah, in terms of revision, um, I don't do tons of revision. It's mostly just when a piece is sold, I usually work with the editor, and obviously there is revision, there is editing. That's part of any writing, but it's not really a very ordered process for me at all. It's kind of it happens while I'm writing. I keep going back and reading my own work, and then kind of making adjustments as I go along.
Right. And that's triggered by the editor. I would like you. Did you prepare a reading? Would you like to read a little excerpt, and then we'll move to the Salvage Crew?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me
Let me actually put the book stand here closer to you so you can, because dragons don't like to necessarily move, or at least me as the host here, I like to make it very, very convenient for my dragons. And Jutta, while Indra is preparing the read, Jutta, do you have that same? What do you think about posting these milestones on social media? Is that giving us or other writers a false, sense of productivity, and may make feel other writers inadequate when somebody posts every day? Hey, just put another 20,000 words in. There you go.
I don't necessarily think so. I mean, I don't think anyone's treating word counts as like this sort of penis that you take out and wag it in public. To be crude about it.
I
What
don't know.
Indra said.
Everything is just so staged. I mean, this is one of the
It
things
is,
with
but
the
at least
platforms.
I can only speak for my experiences and a few others that I've spoken to about this. And like Indra said, it's euphoric. Then there is a combined sense of both the high and the relief of actually being able to
Mhm.
do this. And it's a celebration. It's a very small victory. And
Yeah.
sometimes, particularly this year, you know, someone saying into the void, "Hey, I did something," is often a way, I think, of them reminding themselves more than
Yeah.
anyone else that they are worth something, that they're doing something, that time is not frozen for them.
Yeah, if I could also address the thing of word count posting, that's not something I do because I don't uh, get these massive chunks of writing done every day. Like it's very haphazard, but I wouldn't blame anyone for doing so because, as Yuda points out, I think it's often for yourself. It's just kind of like a diary entry and an affirmation because it is so difficult to write. It's a very challenging process, especially in times like these. And sometimes when you post, people will cheer you on, and I think it's just to make things easier for such a um, you know, it's a process that requires such solitude and concentration, and it's just nice for people to have that affirmation.
Oh, that is really that is very insightful. Actually, Sephira says insightful here also in the chat, because I decoded this as not, I'm sort of adjacent to sort of book Twitter, if you will, and I'm always curious if there is what the level of toxicity is, in
I mean,
online groups, because in Second Life, it can creep in as well as absolutely everywhere.
oh
And so
yeah,
I
I
was
mean,
curious. Yeah, go ahead.
there's always toxicity everywhere, in any space, and there's always going to be people doing things performatively as well. And but it's all contextual. It depends on the person, and you have to kind of judge it for yourself.
All right, Indra. So what do we hear from the excellent Devourers? And I hear you are not. You don't really like to read your own work that much all the time. No.
No, I'm not a
No?
huge fan of
Some
reading my
writers
own
love
book.
that. Our own Ted Williams, as if he's my best buddy. But but Ted Williams reads on Facebook every, like at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's tons of writers who love it, and I
The
would
sound of
love it,
their own voice.
but I don't like the sound of my own voice, especially when I read, and especially when I'm recorded. I have a very strong revulsion against hearing myself, and that applies to when I read my books. But anyway, let's
Well,
do it.
we
I
love
have
it,
read
and the audience, please say that you want to hear Indra. I want to see
the.
this.
No, please. There's no
Everybody in
need
the
for such
local chat.
theatrics. No, it's fine. I've done readings before.
Good.
All right. Are we ready?
Yes, but what do we need to set it up? Where are we? What's happening? Who
Okay,
was
yeah.
killed?
So, Drax already set it up by reading the beginning. So we've got a college professor at this festival in Kolkata, which happens in the winter, late at night, where these rural bards called bowls, they come and sing for the city people. And so, it's just a big gathering where people get high and eat and drink and kind of listen to music. Well, or at least it was. I don't know. I haven't been there for many, many years, so I don't know if it's still the same. It's probably pretty commercialized by now. But when I went to see this festival in real life, it was, it wasn't commercialized at all. It was very. I don't know if I can imagine right now people smoking up so openly. But anyway, yeah. So there's a college professor. He meets a guy who tells him that he's half werewolf, and he starts talking about being immortal and being the shapeshifter, who's spent clearly a lot of time in India. And the half werewolf tells the professor a story, a part of which I'm going to read. All right. The campfire is an oasis of light. The bowls gather around, flames glistening on their dark, swamp damp skins, twinkling in their beards. Oh, I should add, this story, it's a flashback to several hundred years before the present that the book is starting off in, which is the contemporary
That's right, because
Kolkata.
the
So
shapeshifter obviously has lived for hundreds of years, and he has memories of the different parts of India that they travel through, and he
exactly,
remembers them from like hundreds of years ago, which is
yeah.
really that's
So
another really cool aspect. Yeah.
So he's offering the college professor this memory, and of course we don't know if it's real, whether it's made up or what. But he tells it in
Yeah,
a
this one we
hypnotic
don't even
fashion that
know.
kind of,
Yeah, we don't know if he's mentally disturbed, possibly, or making all sorts of things up.
or a charlatan, yeah. Or but he's a very good storyteller, and he kind of hypnotizes the professor into seeing this story. So that's what I'm reading, and it's kind of like takes place in the wilderness that used to be where that field they're in is now. All right. The campfire is an oasis of light. The bowls gather around, flames glistening on their dark, swamp-damp skins, twinkling in their beards. They sing to ward off the encroaching darkness, their words lifting with the wood sparks towards the stars. They sing, unheeding of signatures on paper, of land exchanges and politics, of the white traders and their tensions with the Nawab and the Mughal Empire. Here in the firelight, they make music and tell stories to one another, to the land, to Bengal, to Hindustan, which does not belong to them, nor to the British, nor the Mughals. They know there are things in the wilderness that neither Mughal nor white man has in his documents of ownership. Things to be found in stories. Then again, they also claim to be mad. I watch the boughs. I can see the others in the gloom, crouched amid the reeds, circling slowly. More approach from afar, their claws sinking into the mud. I can hear them, though, the rustle of their spined fur, the twisting of rushes against their backs. A howl slices the dark. The bowls falter but continue singing, holding tight to their instruments and gnarled staves. I can hear the mosquitoes whining around them, alighting on knuckles popping against skin, gorging, dying in the heat of the fire. There's a young woman among this group of traveling bowls. She looks out into the darkness. the words of their song dissolving on her tongue. Her hair is so black it melts into the night. I remember the taste of her lips, moist but cool from the night air. She keeps her eyes beyond the borders of the fire, searching a wilderness stirred into sentience by the noises of insect and animal, cricket and cockroach, moth and mosquito, snake and mongoose, fox and field rat, jackal and wildcat. Her bright patchwork cloak is wrapped tight around her body, marking her out. She is tired, short, and unarmed, and stands no chance of surviving the attack. Not that the others do either. I can smell her sweat. I can smell her terror like sweat against the gritty spice of wood smoke. The wet soil of the marsh is cold between my toes. The insects catch in my fur, wrestling it, tickling like the reeds and plants around me. The woman knows we are here, beyond their firelight. She knows because I told her myself, as a young man with long hair and kind eyes, tiger pelt on my back. Your party will never reach Satanati and the banks of the river. You are being hunted. You have a day to run away, for we are patient and draw out the hunt for pleasure and sport. I said to her in her sleep, while my own kin were unaware. I am a shapeshifter after all, and not without my abilities. She heard me and saw me, though she slept while I whispered in her ear. She smelled my musk of swamp and blood, shit and piss and rank fur, hair and smooth human skin. She saw the lamps of my green eyes and the pools of my brown eyes. I saw her face twitch as I spoke. She smelled of the stale sweat of travel, of the rich green of sleeping on grass, of the slick of oil on her lips from the roti and sabzi she had eaten before sleeping. I kissed her once. A chill ran across my neck as I did, because she reminded me so much of someone gone. She heard me in her sleep, this foul woman with dirt in her hair, her lips sticky with just a little oil. It is clear that she remembers my warning, but she has not run away. Perhaps one of the bowels is her father, or mother, or sibling, or friend, or lover. It does not matter. She will not leave them behind. She begins to sing with them now, her scared voice strained. She remembers my smell, senses it now beyond the fire and the tangle of the dark. More of us come from the horizons. The scent of cow's blood, a slaughter on their muzzles. They have eaten, but their hunt is not over. Their eyes weave trails as they run, leaping fireflies tracking the loping gait. They flank the group of humans, cutting off escape. The first kill is silent as our running, a glistening whisper of crimson in the air. The last is louder than the baying of a wolf, and rings like the bowl's mad song across the marshes of what is not yet Kolkata. I can hear the howl as I run with this human in my arms, into the darkness, away from the shadows of slaughter. The howl curdles into a roar, enveloping the scream of the last dying minstrel. But she is alive, against me, shivering against my dew-dappled fur. She is alive. Thank you.
Wow, this is Indrapramit reading from the Devourers. Thank you so much. You're listening or watching or are in the presence of the Second Life book club community. And this is the example also of you said the stranger tells the story and he hypnotizes the professor and in a way you accomplish this by hypnotizing the reader. I mean, you really draw them in. But okay, this is enough gushing over my guests. This is terrible.
Thank you. That's very
I,
kind of you to say.
I used to listen to Terry Gross, Fresh Air, and when she had celebrities on, like actors and sometimes writers, I found it terrible. These interviews when she was like, "Oh, you're the greatest," and now I feel like I'm the same. But I'm really I don't know if Terry Gross reads all her books, but
Drax, you either die
yeah.
a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
I'm gonna be here 30 years like this is the most amazing. But now let's move on to Yudhanjaya Wijeratne's The Salvage Crew, which is an amazing space adventure and features the name of Joe Haldeman in the on page 1. Okay, a little a little nod to Joe Haldeman's The Forever War. This is a ragtag crew of mercenaries led by a disembodied AI, and they're flying around, and they have different jobs retrieving stuff that is valuable from other planets. And it starts sort of very sort of tropey, if you will. And then on page 4 or 5, it gets very untropy and very complex and really crazy. And Yudhanjaya, I was told that I should prepare the show with keywords, and one of the keywords by my advisor, and one of the keywords here is the three body problem, because I'm obsessed with the three body problem. And in some ways, the Salvage Crew knocked off the three body problem from my top 10 a little bit. I mean,
Wow.
not
Okay, that's high
completely.
praise. That's high praise. Thank you.
But you're tackling these, obviously the similar themes, and the way you tackle them is really, it's really amazing, because this is a first contact story as well. Um, and it
Yeah,
doesn't it
it is a
what
very
is it? Yeah.
first. So the book functions on three levels for me, right? So on one level, it's a story about some really traumatized people trying their level best to survive in this galactic corporatocracy stuck on this planet, trying to do their jobs and get back home. On another
Mhm.
level, it is about an artificial intelligence that's writing poetry, and a and another artificial intelligence, I will say, and a fundamentally alien one that has a very Wittgensteinian theory of what intelligence is. Care whether you um, it doesn't care whether you go around in large metal ships or you have lasers at your disposal. It's gone so far beyond that. It is a planet-sized intelligence has been sitting here for millions of years, and its
Mhm.
criteria is: are you playing the language game? Are you taking if you take language as a way of denoting concepts and the relationships between them, have you moved from describing the world around you to describing an abstract interiority? Are you changing that symbol map? Are you doing something different with it? And sort of, and on the third level, it's basically me having fun exploring this thesis of I fundamentally believe that the man versus machine mythology of, say, you know, of the whole Skynet fears, right? I believe that's kind of a very boring stance on the issue. Um, and I believe in a more collaborative future. Um, I don't necessarily believe in machines replacing humans or there being this great war. And these are all overplayed stories for me. So I believe in a more collaborative future. This is an experiment at, for me,
Mhm.
collaborating with a bunch of programs that I've written. The planet is generated, a bunch of Markov chains running around, telling me what the weather is like, what the environment is like. The characters are
So hold on.
generated. The poetry.
The planets that are described in the story, you also generate them with a
Oh yeah,
program
yeah,
that
yeah.
you wrote.
I actually wrote a galaxy generator. It's up on GitHub. I wrote it in R, which is a stupid language to write it in. Uh, and then I found David Stark's work. His name is Zarkonin on GitHub. He's written a fantastic plan generator. Uh, and I was like, okay, listen, I love open source stuff. The poetry, even the poetry itself, is OpenAI's GPT-2, which made headlines for how realistic it could be when writing news articles. That's retrained on a selection of my favorite poetry from the Tang Dynasty, so the fifth century. Me having like my goofball fifth century vibes moment. Uh, and it's a collaborative. It's an exploration of, can I collaborate and will it pass a Turing test? And I now have proof that it kind of did with the
Can
publishers,
you
with
exactly?
affiliates.
Can you collaborate with this AI? I mean, the poetry really is really amazing. Did you have to? What did you have to input into this poetry engine? And I also wanted to say that in the book, the main protagonist, the overseer. Oh, we have Ganesha behind you. Oh my God, did
Oh,
you see this
nice,
even? Oh,
nice.
I don't
We
know
sort
if
of
this is
zoom back
Ganesha.
out.
Her name is
Wow,
Floda, but
wow.
see, this
Okay,
is
that's
only at the book club. You don't see that on these Zoom meetings, book meetings, whatever.
yes.
Um, The
Yeah.
the AI is a man machine construct. So he was human. I mean, the
Yes.
main protagonist, the overseer. I guess we have to clarify this because there is a human. He comes from a human, and then he gets
Yes, and it's of
merged
course
with a
shot
machine.
through with the Buddhist philosophy reincarnation. That there's like
Hmm.
this noted thing of this corporation going around harvesting, being extremely colonial and almost harvesting, if you will, these tiny Buddhist populations that are just trying to survive on these planets.
Hmm.
Because turns out they have less. They have less chance of going crazy if they're stripped from their bodies and converted to AI because it's the belief of reincarnation. It's a little bit of my personal theology injected there as well. And that part was meta because that's essentially uh, an AI that AI slash human poet, where the poetry is also generated by an AI slash human combo. Fictional
Amazing.
machine poet powered by a real life machine poet kind of thing.
That's it's really awesome. I want to play the drone that is flying here in front of the book stand, which is merged with Nathan Fillion, who is an actor who acted in many movies. Also, I think he has the Suicide Squad coming up, but he also acted in the Firefly series, of course. But we put his voice into this Second Life drone. It's a man machine thing, just like in the Salvage Crew. And I want to play a little excerpt here where this really sort of exemplifies what's going on in the story, too. And this is an excerpt, I think it's chapter 37, where the crew revives. A replicant. They find a bunch of replicants, but they're pretty low level worker bees, right? And so they revive this one replicant. Chen is his name, and he encounters one of the human crew members, Simon Jewston, who is injured, and he encounters this crew member, but Simon Jewston is possibly not Simon Jewston, but Shen, that replicant, that very sort of basic worker bee replicant, um, is not sure what's going on. He sees Simon and he thinks he's Simon, but then Simon starts speaking in different ways to him, and so this is narrated from
I,
Shen. Do you want to? Is this a good setup, or you want to add anything else? Because you jump
yeah,
between different. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I'm just gonna preface it by saying I'm a huge Philip K. Dick fan. Um, the nod to Haldeman in the first page was purely as a contrast because I'm intentionally describing this as a C team. It's not the A team, it's not the B team. These folks are the bottom of the barrel, and they have a hard time being that. Um, but huge PKD fan, hence this particular sequence.
Hmm. And here is the Salvage Crew.
Unit Shen reporting. Cycle 8. Error, time date mismatch. Error, checksum failed. Please revert to factory settings. Unit alignment has changed. Camera, clouds. Cirrocumulus, under heavy sky. Light is fading. Clouds shot with blood gold of Alumahan. Snow falling. Immediate environs. Snow. Ice. Grass underneath. Something is repeatedly making contact with Unit's left foot. It is what the Overseer has designated a grass snake, although by taxonomy, it cannot be a snake. It has 6 small feet and hunts by ramming a bony head at high speed into objects. In this case, hunting method is going catastrophically wrong. Evolution on this planet has not accounted for Unit Shen. This grass snake will not reproduce. Attempt realignment. Failure warnings. Some systems are offline. Communications. Navigation. Complex object database. You're a lot better than these half-flesh machines, says the voice of crew member Simon Jewston from behind. Crew member is attempting to push Unit up. Unit appears to have been lying on crew member. It takes much effort, but eventually, we are upright. Grass looks several shades darker. Sun falls below horizon, leaving only reflective action from the clouds to illuminate. Crew member Jewston squats. Image recognition glitch. Possible Jewston has 3 arms. Possible Jewston is not bipedal at all. but a series of buildings beyond Stardew Valley, slowly rotating this way. Hello? Hello, I say. Clouds jump suddenly. World darkens. Let's play a game, says Justin conversationally. There is now a tree behind him. Image recognition glitch. Tree expands. Becomes infinitely complex array stretching down into the heart of the planet. Becomes tree again. He is leaning against it. It looks like you have a lot going on in that head. Language parsers, auto-trained responses. I can't tell if you're actually aware or just another pause. I can feel him rifling through my language databases, like the overseer. Ah. Data fetch. Chinese room. Argument by old Earth computational philosopher John Searle, who stated that a digital computer executing a step-by-step program may pass a Turing test, but cannot have a consciousness, regardless of how adequately it processes input and returns input. A Chinese room. Are you a Chinese room, Shen? I'm going to get rid of this stuff. Let's see who you really are inside. Massive internal errors. Something is wrong. Something is wrong. Something is wrong. Something's wrong. Error. Error. We're only conscious when another conscious being examines us, continues Justin, who is not Justin. Sun rises, but it does not illuminate him. Now, let's play the game. What am I? Error. Error. The sun rises and falls. Clouds break into kaleidoscopic patterns. The snowstorm intensifies and abates. A terrible warning cascades, tripping off other warnings, and for the first time, the probability of system shutdown. Error resolved. Communications dataset and scripts restored. Looks like you're not.
And that was an excerpt from the Salvage Crew. This was, again, the replicant Shen narrating his interaction with who he believed was this human crew member, but this is a tiny little spoiler. Obviously, it's not Simon, the crew member. It is this other worldly entity that can go into the machines and the humans through micro machines. It's awesome. This is the Second Life Book Club. Every Wednesday, 12 o'clock. We're marching towards the top of the hour. I'm going to get dinged by my producer again that I'm going over time, but we need to go over time a little bit. Congratulations, Jutta, to another fantastic book. Indra, if you encounter Jutta now, same thing that we did earlier. He's on stage there. You're his fan. You have one question. What would it be to your God?
Wow. Okay.
Well, I would ask, like, how much, to what proportion do you feel like the software that you worked in collaboration with contributed to the book? Like, and how much, for example, the poetry is beautiful. I mean, did you have to edit it at all? I mean, was it naturally so gorgeous and so that's more than one question, isn't it?
Okay. The poetry, I specifically let myself edit only 3 words of each poem.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it was generated. The contribution, I would say, in terms of prose, other than the poetry, very little. Because I went down several pathways initially of trying to see if the holy grail of this kind of research is, of course, can a machine write a novel? And the classical computer science approach is to feed it, the entire collected works of Harry Potter or something, and then laugh at the garbage that comes out on the other side. But because that's not how we function as authors, is it? There are so
Of
many
course.
different patterns and so many different layers of thinking that goes on, and there's the world building. There's how plot works. There's what we think about characters and their inner lives, and all of these things are entirely separate processes. Um, So what I let it do was essentially handle some of the world building and
Yeah.
throw in a lot of throw in some events at me to see if I could then rework them really. So think of it as going to a gallery and staring at paintings and being
Mhm.
inspired by that to write something.
It was like a prompter, yeah. It seems
Yeah.
like the drone is rebelling and
The drone is really full of itself. It says, "I'm a good writer. I
Yeah.
can write better than you."
it's laying down challenges, yeah.
Well, this sounds like a challenge, Joel. It's you're on. But yeah,
But I think what you're
that's
saying basically it's not, but it doesn't go beyond that, right? I mean, the
mm,
structure and really the dramatic arc. Would you say that from the experience of writing this in collaboration with all these AIs,
mm.
would you say that we're at a point where a really compelling dramatic structure can be a satisfying dramatic structure can be generated by machines?
Let's sort of examine that question because which is it's very interesting, right? If you think of how like we tend to look at like news headlines like that recent 2016 I think a Japanese program very much like this actually placed fairly well in a literary prize, and people are like, wow, okay, this is taking over. But let's I was for this I was looking at a far more interesting for me and a far more established branch of sciences, which was game design. Now, if you take Diablo, if you take RimWorld, if you take Dwarf Fortress, for example, which is such a complex simulator of life, really, in a fantasy kingdom, that it generates tens of thousands of years worth of history, including the world and everything. Uh, this is sort of in the realm of procedural generation. Uh,
Hmm.
and it's best to look at it in terms of these different components. Can these things generate worlds? Absolutely.
Hmm.
Can they design narrative? Now that was interesting because how a lot of these games seem to give us a sense of story. Like if you look at RimWorld, if you look at Dwarf Fortress, people play them for hundreds of hours. They write stories about the events that happen. And that's because we as humans have this thing called apophenia, which is where we're really good at seeing patterns in random noise. And given sequence of events, we will try to justify it. We will try to establish causality. Uh, I disagree with like sort of nothing like a novel too, but I've said there are extremely complex patterns that emerge if your system is complex enough. And yes, you can. You absolutely can have something writing a novel, writing a plot structure that makes sense, that flows. We've seen this is essentially a problem of pattern recognition. We've seen plenty of breakthroughs being made in generation of music. Plot is actually not that complex. However, is it better than a human at the job? No, not yet,
Hmm.
because what you don't see is that for you can, for example, I did this experiment where I took a bunch of I read like pretty much all of Agatha Christie's work, then I boiled it down to the essentials that happen in a plot and wrote a bunch of Markov chains to go from one plot sequence to the other in this cyberpunk detective, like cyberpunk version of Hercule Poirot kind of thing.
Hmm.
And you know what it generates? There are like some fantastic plots there. It generates villains, like adds up body parts, what's the city like, what area are we in. It sort of goes between different options, creates all sorts of different scenarios. But most of them are rubbish.
Yeah.
Most of them are rubbish. It's like exactly what happened to No Man's Sky when it released, where the promise was an infinite universe that you could traverse, unique planets. You'd spend a lifetime exploring it because everything was procedurally generated. You'd potentially spend a lifetime exploring the universe of No Man's Sky, and you'd probably never come across another planet that another player has discovered. Most of the planets are rubbish, and that's
Yep.
really what you need to take extreme care with, because most of what you're going to generate is the same.
And that's why
So
we're here in Second Life, where also 50% of the worlds are rubbish, but at least they're created by humans. S-
that's where the
by
humans.
humans,
That's really where like humans are really good at this. We're designed for this stuff. Well, it's
Strangely,
90s as
Veher
well.
says in the local chat, "This is good news. I'm rubbish at plotting." And Water in the local chat shakes his head. I think Water may disagree with me about the rubbish, but just one quick follow up because we're officially out of time. But I just negotiated another block of 10 minutes. I was going to ask you because you mentioned Agatha Christie, and I enjoy Agatha Christie. I was obsessed with Alistair MacLean. I don't know if anybody remembers Alistair MacLean. Many movies made, Where Eagles Dare, The Guns of Navarone. When we're talking about genre fiction that can be very formulaic, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that we can sort of emulate that, although you're saying it's still rubbish. But the yeah, I don't know. I mean, you're not making that charge. I mean, you're not saying that definitively this is where in 5 or 10 years we'll have that the great American novel written by a machine. But
No,
some people
I'm
out there
saying
do say that, and
I'm
I
saying
would,
that
yeah.
framing is inefficient.
Hmm.
I'm saying we are trying to reinvent the wheel when we don't need to. Humans are already good at this stuff. Can you have a machine assisting? Absolutely. Like that makes a lot more sense. If you can handle some, if you, for example, if I was to write about a fictional city, and there are plenty of really interesting algorithms in the urban design space that can design cities that can optimize for traffic flows and so on. Why not? Why
Yeah.
not add and make it richer? Make the experience of writing a book as a human richer, instead of saying, "Oh, the definitive novel will be written by a machine." That's eh, honestly.
This is a really good point, and I mean, this I think I completely agree with you, and in many ways, I mean, I don't know if anybody has ever actually done what you've done here, and I think you've actually proven that because as Indra says, I don't have the book here. Would have to go to the other room, but some of the poems are really exceptional. I mean, they really resonate with me.
Yeah,
It's
my
it's
challenge was, if you can you tell that this is which parts are generated by machine. And in fact, when I
no,
sent the book to Indra, I
yeah.
sent him like this detailed write up of what I'd done. And what I really want to see was if he, as an author, could tell. And pretty much everyone I spoke to couldn't tell where what
Yeah,
parts were
I couldn't
inspired.
tell. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
mean, of course, I knew the poetry was generated because you told me, but
yeah,
I wouldn't have been able to tell.
yeah, but like there are a few plot events there that are actually thrown in by
Right.
by a random event generator.
I mean,
Um,
there's definitely a sense of surprise to the plotting as it goes on that was very striking, but obviously that can also be done by a human. But
exactly, exactly. If you can't tell the difference, and if a lot of people can't tell, if hundreds of people can't tell the difference, then I
right.
think we're onto something. And so far from what I've seen, people can't.
Well, we don't know if this is the end of the world or the beginning. We always have to frame it in this dualistic way. I learned that in journalism school, which actually I didn't go to journalism school. But one question that I do want to ask you about, because I also plowed through Numbercast, which is exceptional, and
Which was human written.
Numbercast was human written, but it's
Yeah,
about
in case everybody thinks that I'm basically like a robot now. Actually,
he's the robot.
99% of everything I've written has been written
Cyborg.
by
Yeah.
hand, in longhand. I'm just saying, just putting that out there.
Look at his jerky arm movements of his avatar. If I mean, that looks very robotic. I mean, the dragon looks more
Intellectual
real.
watering can. Yeah.
But so Numbercast, just there's one question I mean, there's many, but it boils down to one thing. For me, Numbercast is amazing. It's about a social network that is basically taking over the entire world, similar to the social ranking thing that they have in China. I actually forgot what the name is that they use in China, and Black Mirror was playing on that as well. But in China, you are tied to a ranking in your behavior, and if you walk
Yes.
across the street, on a red light too many times, then you can't buy an airplane ticket. I mean, I'm just making stuff up, but basically, it's tied to. This is how it's tied together. Well, refresh my memory. What is the name that they use in China for that system?
Social credit or sesame credit. Those are
Social
the
credit.
yeah. Um, yes, also the name of a political party in British Columbia.
I,
I would submit to you that, however, this particular strain of dystopia was not unique to China, and there's a little bit of a narrative fallacy in demonizing that part of the world.
Oh,
So I
I'm certainly don't want to demonize because I was going to add that in Germany and in many other countries too, the way your credit is ranked is very
exactly
nefarious and it's very sort of dark. And here in Germany, we have the Schufa, which nobody really knows how they look at if you're worthy of credit or worthy of renting or leasing or whatever. And it's very similar. So you just extrapolate,
yeah
and your book really is is around the corner from what we have right now. But let me just say that the company, the number here, they're trying to. They're trying to go into every area, and there could the it's what's fascinating is it's sort of an inside the company type of a book. It's almost like a fictional, mea culpa of some of these Facebook executives who go like, "Yeah, we're sorry that we kind of messed up democracy and
yes
we didn't know." And so that was so refreshing. I mean, was that something that you intended to do, or did you write it when I
yeah
guess it
because
was
I
already starting with this sort of like, I'm sorry
well
we messed up the world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I used to work for a tech company that is a middleware platform provider. It's one of the world's best. Goes head to head with Oracle and IBM and so on and so forth. And I, as the guy who could sort of code and write, eventually ended up being tasked with looking at certain implementations and seeing what the stories were. One of these things was Experian, one of the world's largest credit rating industries,
Hmm.
one of the world's largest companies for credit scoring. Period. And I started learning. I was interested. I started looking at the sheer amount of data going into this, um, and I started looking at, well, are these algorithms transparent? Is this happening? And the answer is no. And at the same time, I was very privy to the in all these companies. I was very privy to like the Silicon Valley optimism, I will say, because the inherent thing of number corp is, hey, we're trying to make the world better, right?
Yes.
Let's replace the credit scoring system, which is outdated. A human's worth should not be tied to the bank account, but to the amount of social influence you exert. So for the first time, an artist can be as important as a billionaire. And what they don't take into account is second degree effects, because with people, children inherit the social networks of their parents. So
Hmm.
you find this thing in going into the second generation, that the son or daughter or child of a security guard has access only to that social strata. The son or daughter of that first gen artist or billionaire who was the who's who, the Times top 100 most influential, they start off from that. And now those divisions are algorithmically enforced. There's very little class mobility.
And
And
that
now,
is really what's
yeah,
wrong with predictive policing too. Let me just read one quick thing. Here's an exchange of these executives in a company-wide chat. And one person says, "What about the allegations that as a sort of social discrimination is forming around the number?" Again, this is their product. "For example, convicted felons finding it hard to dine at restaurants or get into clubs, things like that." And the other guy says, "Well, they're convicted felons, aren't they? We locked them up for a reason, didn't we?" And then the person says, "I mean, not to be rude and all, but Stephen, can you honestly say that dining next to a thief doesn't make you nervous? It would, right?" And then the first person says, "And we're not creating discrimination. We're just making sure people are safe and that businesses really have a way of maintaining the kind of culture people they want for their clientele. In fact, going back to the example of a convicted felon, the same tools that are available to you are given to the felon as well. The number app will sort of show them what parts of their life they can improve. Isn't that a great thing?" And so here they justify what they're doing. But yet I could say the same thing. I mean, what's so, when you're saying this is generational poverty, and but this number app and these other ranking schemes, don't they democratize social mobility?
So this was actually inspired because Numbercast for me, it's interesting that a lot of people see it as a futurist. Hey, this is happening. This is going to happen in 5 years, kind of thing. Because for me, I was taking something that I saw around me and just pushing that a little bit further down the logical chain. Like this was inspired by. This is a very Sri Lankan stereotype, right? But generally, I've seen this quite a lot, particularly in Colombo, when two people meet the first conversation they'll generally have is, "Oh, where did you go to school? I went to Royal. I went to St. Thomas. Oh, so you must have known this guy, or this guy, or this guy." And you see the social hierarchical dance happening, this ritual of trying to figure out whether this person is more important, better connected, less connected, all of this navigation. And people treat each other eventually once this navigation is done with as if they had numbers above their heads telling them how important they
Mm-hmm.
are. Now, the beauty of society as it is right now, to a certain extent, not to a great extent, is that you need to do this dance. There is still information asymmetry. For example, if you and I met on a random street and we didn't know each other,
Mm-hmm.
we wouldn't know each other from Adam, and therefore we wouldn't know what this particular number was. With this, what happens is, so I sort of pushed that and said, what if this dance was done for you? Um, what would happen? So current society allows a certain amount of movement because information asymmetry exists. This type of society that the number corp and number cast depicts would be damn near impossible.
Yep. It would really
It's
cement
interesting.
the structure. Yeah, go ahead, Indra.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is, of course, correct, but it's interesting to see how even in our present and current society, the ways we do have that number, how it's
Oh yeah.
enforced.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
just because
Absolutely.
in terms of, like, for example, in India, there was this in Calcutta a few years ago, there was this whole kind of incident where an upper middle class woman brought in her driver to eat with her at a at an upper middle class upscale restaurant, and they kicked out the driver, and they knew immediately that he was not of the
Absolutely.
appropriate number
Absolutely.
because of his
Yep.
clothes, because of the color of
Yep.
his
Yep.
skin. And this
Yeah.
is how insidiously this is all enforced. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's
I
just
was
so disgusting. But yeah,
yeah, yeah. Like I said, I was basically just taking the world around me and pushing that a little
absolutely, yeah. I
bit.
mean, it sounds completely like
Yeah, because
what we have, except
if
algorithmically.
for example you come to Sri Lanka, a lot of former British colonies, right? How you speak English
Absolutely, yeah.
immediately moves you up. And I've seen this firsthand where I went from um, you know really like speaking a lot more Sinhala and so on, and now when I speak, because my accent has also shifted over time, purely because of that. It's not because I've become smarter or anything of the sort. Purely because of that, people, when I speak, I'm very well aware that I can show up in a t-shirt and shorts to establishments where a
Hmm.
better
Mm-hmm.
dressed person, if he spoke slightly worse English, would be immediately kicked out. I've had
Yeah.
this happen where on Mirisa Beach, where the service is extraordinarily discriminatory, and in fact that's a huge legal problem there. um, I've been on the phone speaking in English to my coworker or something, and they were like, "Oh, sir, come in, come in, come in," and I immediately
Hmm.
get five-star treatment. Right?
Yeah.
There are so many ways in which these divisions are telegraphed, and people, so many ways that people also, even in cases where this is ambiguous, try to suss that out,
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
because people do this to each other, and so Number Corp is essentially taking part of the reason for its fictional success, really, because it's taking something that exists and saying, listen, let's just we'll make it easy. It's like PayPal. This is me can make it easier
Yeah.
to spend money online. We'll make it easier to figure out
I was just going to
whether this is
say,
good.
Indra says, well, we have these classifications in this society that is supposed to be classless, but we have all these indicators. Indra, all that Silicon Valley wants to do is make it easier to distinguish between these people. Don't you understand?
Yes,
Convenient.
it's Numbercast is very, every utopia is someone else's dystopia if you look at it
Yeah.
closely enough. The flip side
No,
to
I
the
mean
same
because,
coin.
but you also really show. I think. I mean, again, I can totally see that Silicon Valley types would read this book and find nothing wrong with it, and find like this is awesome.
Oh,
Let's do it,
also
right?
one of the really interesting reviews I've had on this is someone who read this and said, it's an Amazon review. They've said, I 100% recommend this. In fact, I recommend this to a business colleague. He's growing a startup over any business book. In fact, I think
This
the
is
author and
not
I,
surprising at all. Yeah.
yeah, yes, and they actually say, in fact, I think the author and I might have been at the same conference together because I remember the events that he recounts of this F8, this Facebook conference.
Oh my
I was
God.
literally, I was laughing while reading that.
This is so interesting. I mean, something that can be so horrifying to one person, me and us here. This scenario is the dream scenario for others. But
For so
we
many people, for so many people.
For so many people, yeah.
this is such a I would we're going to continue a little bit here in the post game with these types of discussions. I have an entire sheet here of more in the political realm because you guys are also very active through your work and also privately on Twitter. I mean, I used to say everything I know about South Asia or India is through Arundhati Roy, who I uh, cherish as a novelist, but also as a very astute political observer. But now I follow you guys, and now I I know more. I know everything about South Asia and India through Arundhati Roy, Indrapramit, and Yudhanjaya. So thank you. My initial question actually was a simple one in terms of Numbercast was why is Facebook bad? Because a lot of my friends say, what, why are you always talking about Facebook and what's the big deal? Really quickly, can you say in 30 seconds to someone who says, "Yeah, I know, there's like a lot of stuff that I don't want, and they feed me certain things that I don't like, and they have all my data, but you know what? I don't tell them everything, so it's not a big deal." If a person like that approaches you, Yuta or Indra, and I don't want to vilify Facebook. I mean, this is a model that is ubiquitous. Oh, my producer says she has to run. So got make it 30 seconds. What's the problem with the behemoth social networks?
Oof. Okay.
Well, we'll do it in the
Yeah,
post game. You
30
know what? We'll
seconds.
You
we'll
realize
do
I've
it.
written like this is like my research papers have like 200 citations on some of this stuff. Right? You realize the problem here.
I mean, this
We'll
is
be here
something
for
where
hours.
exactly it's just something where I'm working myself on an answer or sort of like a
Okay,
not a can't response. But let's do this in the post game because we got to wrap the official portion.
let's
The
do this in
producer has to go.
post.
So first of all, thank you, Yudhanjaya Wijeratne, Indrapramit Das. Thank you guys for coming to the book club. Really, really wonderful. And folks,
Thank you for having us.
pick up their work, seek out the work. It's important to support writers. If you like to read, you need to support the art of writing because, as we now have learned, AIs will write everything in the future, and they work for very cheap. Um,
And if you
Yudhanjaya,
can, don't use Amazon to buy the books. Obviously, if there's no other option, I mean, I use it often, but
yes.
if you can.
And bookshop.org is expanding, and it's read up on
Yeah.
bookshop.org. It seems really legit the way they do business. They're now delivering in the UK and in the US, and I think in Canada as well. But yeah, thank you for saying this, Indra. This is really important. So seek out these independent outlets. Um, so yeah, thanks to my team, Strawberry producer. Big thanks to Kralos, Marianne McCann, Arden Schwartzman, AJ McDowell actually makes the coffee cup, the Second Life Book Club coffee cups. Hattie Panacek built the space station here, and who else? Well, all the Lindens, of course, and all the Lindens and the moles. And next week is scheduled Anne Griffin, another writer from Ireland. Of course, so we're going to change the venue. We're going to be in the pub again, but the pub will look differently because Anne is some sort of bird avatar. I just put the slide
Oh.
in the back there. Her book is
I
When
have to
All...
say,
Yes,
Drax, very quickly, thanks
quickly.
everyone for making this a very interesting birthday. It's 2 a.m.
It's your birthday?
Yeah,
What?
technically this is my birthday. This is my date of anniversary.
Oh my
Happy
It's 2
God.
birthday.
a.m. I just realized it. This is
You
easily one of the
just
most
realized
interesting
it?
birthdays I've had. Thank you.
Don't you remember, Indra? He said earlier that he forgets what day of the week and he doesn't know who he is. He is interacting with AIs.
No,
I mean,
but
anything could happen.
I
Yes, am
understand
I?
what he means. He means that it just turned to his birthday. It wasn't like it's morning of his birthday.
Yeah, it's like two-ish. Like, am I a man dreaming of being a machine or a machine dreaming of being a man? I don't know.
Because it's late for us. It's 2:50 a.m.
Yeah, it's 2:50 a.m. here.
You guys got to go to bed. Oh my God, this is way too
No,
late.
this is still not my
Ah,
bedtime.
sleep is for the weak, man.
I just turned building on. If anybody has any fireworks, they can res it now and they can put stuff out on the ground. Here's stuff that explodes. Do it now before I turn building off. So next week, happy birthday, Yuta! And next week, Wednesday, is Anne Griffin with her magnificent book When All Is Said. Thank you guys for coming, and I'll see you all next week at 12 o'clock on the Second Life Book Club.